Imagine a civilization so vast, so powerful, that it governed over 70 million people. A civilization that built roads still in use today, wrote laws that still echo through modern courts, and commanded armies that made emperors out of generals and gods out of men. Now imagine it gone. Not in a single catastrophic moment, but slowly, painfully, over centuries. Unraveling from within before it was ever truly broken from without. This is the story of how the greatest empire the Western world had ever seen ceased to exist. And more importantly, why. At its peak in the 2nd century AD, the Roman Empire was a marvel of human organization. It stretched from the British Isles in the northwest to the deserts of Mesopotamia in the east. It encompassed modern-day England, France, Spain, Egypt, Turkey, and everything in between, roughly 5 million square kilometers of territory under a single authority. Its military, the legendary Roman legions, was the most disciplined fighting force on earth. Its infrastructure was without equal. Aqueducts carried fresh water to cities of hundreds of thousands. A network of over 80,000 kilometers of roads connected the empire's extremities to its beating heart, the city of Rome itself. The Pax Romana, or Roman peace, lasted nearly 200 years. Trade flourished. Cities grew. Philosophy, architecture, and law reached heights that would not be matched again for over a millennium. So what went wrong? Historians have debated this question for centuries, and the honest answer is, it was never just one thing. Rome did not fall because of a single catastrophic failure. It collapsed under the accumulated weight of several interconnected crises, each feeding into the next. After the golden age of the 5 good emperors ended with the death of Marcus Aurelius in 180 AD, Rome entered an era of increasingly chaotic leadership. The 3rd century alone saw over 50 emperors, many of them military commanders who seized power by force, ruled briefly, and were then assassinated by the next general who wanted the throne. This era, known as the crisis of the 3rd century, lasted from 235 to 284 AD and nearly tore the empire apart. When power depends entirely on the loyalty of soldiers, it becomes a product of something to be bought. And that purchasing of loyalty had consequences. Wars are expensive. So is maintaining an army of hundreds of thousands across a sprawling frontier. To fund its military campaigns, the Roman government began devaluing its currency, melting down silver coins and replacing them with cheaper alloys. What resulted was catastrophic inflation. Prices skyrocketed. Trade became unreliable. The middle class was squeezed, and tax collection, already a notoriously corrupt enterprise, grew increasingly difficult. Meanwhile, the empire's economy, which had long relied on the labor of enslaved people captured in conquest, began to stagnate. As expansion slowed, so did the flow of new slaves. Agricultural output declined. The empire was spending more than it was producing, and the gap was widening every decade. Rome had always lived with the threat of external enemies, but by the 3rd and 4th centuries, that threat had grown considerably more dangerous. To the east, the Sassanid Persian Empire was an organized, aggressive power that repeatedly challenged Roman control of the Middle East. To the north, Germanic tribes, the Visigoths, Vandals, Ostrogoths, and others had spent centuries living on the edges of Roman territory. They had observed Roman tactics. They had, in many cases, served in Roman armies. They were no longer the disorganized raiders Rome had once easily repelled. And then came the Huns. Sweeping out of Central Asia in the late 4th century, the Huns were a terrifyingly mobile and ferocious people. Their pressure on the Germanic tribes didn't just cause border skirmishes, but triggered a massive displacement of entire peoples, pushing them westward and southward into Roman territory en masse. This is perhaps the hardest cause to quantify, but many historians argue it was the most corrosive. Roman governance at its best had functioned because of shared civic values, a sense of Roman identity that transcended ethnicity, language, or origin. By the 4th century, that identity had fractured. Wealthy landowners accumulated vast estates and evaded taxes. Local governors prioritized their own interests. Soldiers, many of them now recruited from the very Germanic tribes Rome was trying to repel, had no deep loyalty to an abstract empire. Trust in Roman institutions eroded slowly, like stone underwater. And institutions that are not trusted eventually cease to function. By the late 3rd century, Emperor Diocletian recognized that the empire had simply become too large for one person to govern. His solution was to divide it administratively into the Western Roman Empire, governed from Rome and later Ravenna, and the Eastern Roman Empire, governed from the new capital of Constantinople. Founded by Emperor Constantine in 330 AD, the division was intended as a pragmatic management decision. But in practice, it created two separate trajectories. The Eastern Empire, wealthier, more urbanized, and better positioned for trade, would survive and indeed thrive for another 1,000 years as the Byzantine Empire. The Western Empire would not. The Western Empire in the 5th century was a shadow of what Rome had been. Its treasury was depleted. Its armies were skeletal and unreliable. Its emperors were increasingly powerless, mere figureheads manipulated by military commanders and powerful generals, many of them of Germanic origin. In 410 AD, the unthinkable happened. The Visigoths, led by a chieftain named Alaric, sacked the city of Rome itself. It was the first time Rome had been captured in 800 years. The psychological shock was immense across the Mediterranean. People who had grown up believing Rome was eternal were forced to confront a very different reality. The final blow came 66 years later. In 476 AD, a Germanic chieftain named Odoacer deposed the last Western Roman emperor of a young and powerless boy named Romulus Augustulus. Odoacer did not declare himself the new Roman emperor. He simply sent imperial regalia to Constantinople, as if to say, there is no Western Empire left to rule. The date, September 4th, 476 AD, is the moment historians conventionally mark as the fall of the Western Roman Empire. The fall of Rome did not plunge Europe into silence overnight. What followed was a long, complex transition, a period we often call the early Middle Ages. Germanic kingdoms rose in the territories once held by Rome. The Catholic Church preserved Latin learning and Roman administrative traditions. Roads, aqueducts, and legal codes were inherited, adapted, and built upon. But the consequences were real and lasting. Long-distance trade collapsed across much of Western Europe. Urban populations shrank dramatically. Literacy declined. For centuries, the standard of living for ordinary people fell measurably below what citizens of the Western Roman Empire had once enjoyed. Europe would spend the better part of 1,000 years slowly reconstructing what Rome had built, often literally, using Roman stones. And yet, Rome never truly disappeared. Its language became French, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, and Romanian. Its law became the foundation of legal systems across the world. Its calendar still governs how we mark time. Its architectural vocabulary still shapes how we build courthouses, museums, and government buildings. As the historian Edward Gibbon wrote in the 18th century, and historians have been arguing with him ever since, the decline and fall of Rome remains one of the most consequential, most studied, and most debated events in all of human history. Was the empire's collapse inevitable? Was it primarily internal or external? Was it a fall at all, or a transformation? The debate continues. And that, in itself, tells you something about Rome's enduring power. Rome stood for over 1,000 years. It was not destroyed in a day, or a decade, or even a century. It was worn down by corruption, by inequality, by political dysfunction, by the failure of its leaders to serve the institutions they had inherited, and by pressures from a changing world that no longer yielded to the old answers. None of those forces are foreign to us. Every civilization that has ever existed has believed, on some level, that it was different, that the forces which consumed others would not consume it. Rome believed that too. If even Rome could fall, that eternal city, that undefeated empire, that monument to human ambition and organization, what lessons does history offer the civilizations that have come after it? That is not a question for ancient historians alone. That question belongs to all of us right now, in this moment, as we decide what kind of civilization we choose to be.